Welcome to Camp Maddie, Pet Inclusive Housing Edition. I'm Diana Cruz, Program Director at Heart LA.
Hi, I'm Jillian McMillian, and I'm a lived experience advocate for the homeless, a newly certified cat behaviorist, now accepting job offers, and a proud advocate and board member for My Dog is My Home.
Next up is Shannon Glenn, Executive Director of My Pitbull is Family, a nonprofit based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Its mission is to keep families together. They do this by advancing dog-inclusive rental and insurance policies and providing pet retention programming. Hi, Shannon.
Hello, how are you?
Doing well. Take it away whenever you're ready.
Sounds good. I also have to say we're twinning right now with our
We
t-shirt.
are. I love this shirt.
All right, let me share real quick. There we go. So we're going to dive into some dog inclusive housing and how it's impacting families throughout the country and what we're working on over at My Pitbull is Family. All right, so I'm Shannon. I'm the executive director of My Pitbull is Family. You can see here, I've got Wilbur and Charlotte, my two blocky-headed treat eaters and fart machines. We also have Luna, Tuna, and Fern. So adding some small dogs into my life. I don't really know who I am anymore, but they definitely bring me a ton of joy, and wouldn't be able to do the work that we're doing without the four of them. And if anyone from my team is on the call, they would want me to say that I have a cat at home and also the two cats that live here at the resource center with us, Two Chains and Cinnamon. So of course we have to mention the cats too. We can't just only talk about the dogs. All right. So 10 years ago, I was leasing a house in Minneapolis, and you can see that I got a little bit of an email from our landlord, and they were saying, oh, you decided to buy a pit bull after you moved in. We didn't ask about the breed of dog. You did send a pet deposit though, but our homeowner's insurance does not cover pit bulls, and therefore that puts us in a very difficult situation. You can see right above that how Wilbur felt about that email, where he might have took a number two in a food bowl on the porch. But Wilbur is my reason of why that I do this work. I recognize that I had the privilege at the time to push back on the landlords and say, oh, nope, he's a American Bulldog mix. He's not a pit bull. You know, being able to have that conversation and continue to live there. But that doesn't mean that our journey to find dog inclusive housing had stopped. So we continued to search for housing with apartments throughout our over 10 years together now. So a little bit about My Pitbull is Family. Our mission is to keep families together by advancing dog inclusive rental insurance policies and providing essential pet retention programming. We want to create communities where pets and people can live together at home without facing discriminatory policies, and where pet support services are equitable and accessible. We value community, compassion, and collaboration. So with these three C's, we really reflect and look forward to the work that we're doing, and making sure that we always are bringing people into the work that we're doing, because at the end of the day, the work that we are doing is all about people, and the pets are just an added bonus. So common misconceptions about our organization. Yes, we are called My Pitbull is Family, but no, it is not just for pit bulls. So my commonly discriminated against or restricted dog is family.org was way too long of a website for us. And we are not a rescue. So we do not intake animals. Everything we do is to keep people and pets together at home. Now, here are some of our programs. So we started back in 2011, really focused in on dog inclusive housing. Some would say that we were one of the first organizations to really start having these conversations. But since then, we started to grow. And of course, we have more partners in this work. So we still do rental pet policy, research and legislation efforts. We have our North Minneapolis Pet Resource Center. We have our Community Pals program, which we'll talk about a little bit later. We do monthly community pet clinics, so making sure people have access to pet care and vaccines. We do spay neuters. We have a mobile pet resource center that we launched earlier this year. We're hopefully launching some crisis boarding at the beginning of 2025. And then we have our community animal medicine professionals program where we train community members who are often marginalized and overlooked to enter the veterinary profession. And we are really excited about that work as well. So building longer tables and keeping people and pets together. So this brings us to our first poll question. Have you ever had trouble finding housing that would welcome you and your pets? So the answer is yes or no, or maybe you've always owned a house, maybe you still live at home with your family and haven't had to search for housing. You could put not applicable. Okay, so about 56% of folks on the call have struggled to find housing that would welcome you and your pets. 22% of folks have not, and then 21% of folks have housing arrangements where they haven't had to search for housing. That is interesting. I knew that there would be a lot of yeses, but I thought there'd be a lot more. So this is an interesting group of folks on the call. Now, one thing that a lot of folks don't know that exists is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And so in that Universal Declaration of Human Rights, under Article 25, we all have the right to standard of living that's adequate for the health and well-being of ourselves and of our families. And one way that I like to look at this is that also includes the pets, right? So if we are, not just talking about our human companions within our family, but our pets are also family members. So just knowing that this does exist, and I think it can be up to your own interpretation, and my interpretation is that it does include pets. Now, whether or not everyone follows the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we don't as a country and as a nation. However, this is a document that does exist, and I encourage everyone to check it out. Now, one thing that we have found in our research is that there's over 25 different types of dogs that are typically restricted in rental pet policies. And we're going to take a look at that list here. And some of these might shock you, or you might have some questions about it. But one thing that has really stuck out to me during our work is that last part of any mix of any or above. And so if your dog is, 10 to 20% of a certain type of dog, they're often restricted within rental pet policies. And that's based on either a DNA test or visual identification, which is a whole nother presentation. And I think some folks that are on the call could give that a lot better than I could. But we're going to go ahead and do our second poll question. And so there it is. Does one or more of your dog breeds fall under this commonly discriminated list? So yes, no, maybe you're a cat person. That's totally fine, or you have geckos at home. But I'm curious if your dog is a mix or maybe even a purebred of any of these. Interesting. Yeah, still 50%. I think these are like the same percentages as the last question. So interesting group of folks on the call. Maybe a lot of folks with smaller dogs, but definitely still a majority of you have dogs that fall under the list that would commonly be restricted. In hindsight, what I should have done is also included if your dog was more than 25 pounds. And then I think that the answer to the question would be a little different, but we'll do that next time we give a presentation like this. So some national pet stats, about 79 million households have cats, 108 million dogs are owned in the US. I should say 79 million cats are owned in the US, which we're seeing, increases in the number of households year by year that are having more and more pets. So a 17% increase in households with cats in the last 10 years, a near 50% increase in households with dogs in the past 10 years. And so that's where having conversations around dog inclusive and pet inclusive housing is so key, is because more and more people are getting pets. So if 69 million households in the US have dogs, 95% of Americans view their dogs as members of their family. We also saw that 52% of homeowners surveyed acquired a pet after their homeowners insurance policy began and didn't realize that they might lose their insurance because of their pet. So going back to that list of dogs, if you have a commonly restricted dog, you need to check your homeowner's insurance policies as well, because oftentimes you can be dropped for coverage or potentially be paying more, needing to have a different policy because of the type of dog that you have. So something to check into for those 52% of folks on the call. There are over 5 million US households that are behind on rent. And if you hop onto the Human Animal Support Services website, they have a pet eviction calculator, which is pretty neat. And you can dial it back to your local communities as well. But nationally, that equates to over 7 million pets that could be at risk of losing their housing. And with only 34 affordable and available rental homes that exist for every 100 extremely low income renters or households, we are facing a very serious crisis when it comes to housing and making sure that people can keep their pets at home. And of course, mentioning that, folks that are often behind on rent are low income households who experienced a job loss or income loss during the pandemic, which predominantly are folks of color, lower income folks, and now households with children. And we know, the shelter system, affordable housing, everything around housing is currently in crisis. Some animal surrender stats. We have information here from Best Friends. So the majority of the reasons why pets are surrendered is simply because of human reasons. Folks have too many animals. We're all so caring and loving and taking multiple pets, or maybe we're having some litters at home that we're unable to care for. We have caretaker or family deaths, where then we're having to scramble and rehome pets. Behavior is still a main talking point. The financial needs are continuing to grow. So making sure that we are providing different resources for people and their pets in our communities to help reduce some of those financial burdens. But housing continues to be the top reason why dogs are surrendered across the country. And with knowing that we're in a housing crisis, we're going to continue seeing that number rise over the next 3 to 5 years, if not longer than that. So there was a brand new study that just came out at the end of October called Barriers to Finding and Maintaining Pet Inclusive Affordable Housing Tenant Experiences in Houston, Texas. Some of the authors might be on the call, so thank you for doing this work. But two things that really stuck out for me from the study was the anecdotes that people that took the surveys said. And so one was around, if you have enough money, you can have a pet, right? We've had that conversation today about trying to remove well, if you can't afford it, don't have it. And simply, we're just seeing so many barriers put in place for folks with limited incomes, and that is probably many of us on the call as well. So the affordable housing you see, because if you have enough money, you can basically rent those apartments that have pets, the ones that have parks and all the amenities. But the affordable housing where they don't treat people with respect and dignity a lot of times is vast. And so we need to make sure that we're providing dignity and respect to folks that are searching for housing regardless of their income levels, and making sure that people can find pet inclusive housing. The other one that really stuck out to me was someone saying it felt like choosing between life and death. So many of us really rely on the companionship of our pets to make it through the day, and recognizing that there are so many people across the country that are having to make really, really, really hard decisions between, keeping their pets and being able to live. And oftentimes we're finding that within housing as well. So I joked on my own social media of how many times can I put the dumpster fire emoji in a presentation, and I promise you it's just once. Everything does absolutely feel like a dumpster fire right now within animal welfare. I think we all have really amazing things going on, but when we start really diving in and talking about dog inclusive housing, it feels like something that we won't accomplish. The very small changes are great, but they're not small changes for everyone. Um, but I'm here to hopefully help, and with the other panelists through this Camp Maddie is to tell you that there are little glimpses of light, and that we will be able to, if we can work together, we can really make some positive change. So really making sure that we're supporting people and pets with compassion. So like those stories in the previous slide, recognizing that yes, a pet is on one side of the leash, but also there is a human on the other end as well. So we need to be treating both ends of the leash with compassion. So a little bit about our rental research. So we've been collecting research now for the last 13 years, I believe. So we want to try and figure out which pet-friendly apartments are truly dog inclusive. And when I say pet-friendly, I mean apartments that accept dogs and cats. And then dog inclusive, we'll talk a little bit about what that means for us. We have a national volunteer team that conducts this research every single month. We have our rental research dashboard and our housing database. We have the nation's largest dog inclusive rental database. It's free to use on our website. A lot of organizations that become community pals with us just embed it to their website or link to it so that it's a one-stop shop for folks searching for housing in their area. Or if you have a very small database or a list of dog inclusive rentals on your website, you can also share that with us as well. So in our database, we include rentals that have no breed or weight restrictions, anything with a weight restriction that's over 60 pounds. And we do that because most dogs are around or under 60 to 80 pounds. And so we want to provide more options for folks that are searching for housing, especially if you have like a smaller pit bull type dog. And then we do also provide exceptions for if a rental allows folks to live there with a canine good citizen certification, or if they pass a pet interview. Pet interviews can be tricky. While yes, landlords should be basing that interview on the type of dog and the dog's behaviors. One, is a landlord truly trained in dog behavior? Probably not. Could it be a stressful situation for the dog? 100%. But two, it also provides an additional option for the landlord to provide discrimination based on the person while saying it's on the dog. So we want to make sure that we're very careful in pet interview questions and in those interactions with landlords as well. So our database is a resource for individuals and families. We work to understand rental research trends and pet policies across the country. You can see there's the All Dogs Welcome logo that we have that Diana and I are both wearing, which is one of our favorite logos, right? Because it's truly encompassing all dogs, big and small. Our rental research has started in 2011. We added the implementation of Esri and the ArcGIS platform for technology. So if you're doing any mapping at your shelter, your organizations, and you need a tool, Esri is amazing. And then we have an expansive and growing housing database, and of course, our volunteer team. We could not do the work that we're doing without our amazing volunteers. Our housing team is 100% volunteer run. and they're changing the lives of people across the country every single day. Our rental research process is we research locations and develop our spreadsheets. We do this by folks submitting if they need to find a place in a particular area. If your organization reaches out to us and needs some help doing a housing research project, or if there's someone working on legislation and they need a data point, and so we're able to help knock out some of that research. We then engage with the rental research the rental properties. We're either calling or emailing, having conversations with the leasing agents or property managers, or searching on their website and making sure that we can find the information that we need. We then update our database. We update it just about every month. So when the volunteers are done with their research, it auto-populates into our database. And then we also send follow-up mailings to all the apartments that we contact, so whether they're dog inclusive or not, just to let them know that we exist. And so what we have found is leasing agents are really thankful that they now have a resource where they can send people to search for housing, instead of just being like, nope, sorry, we don't accept that type of dog. But now we have a resource that you should check out My Pit Bull is Family, and they have a national database where you can hopefully find somewhere to live. So the information that we collect if dogs are allowed, if there are breed restrictions. We do collect if cats are allowed. We want to have a fully encompassed pet policy listed on our database if possible. If there's any weight restrictions, what the full pet policy is, the pet rent, pet amenities, pet fees and deposits, and pet limits. So we do our best to collect all of this information for every listing in our database if it's available and if they're willing to let us have that information. But we know that all of this information plays a huge factor into families finding a place to live. So our goals with our data and our research is to create legislative change, to increase dog inclusive pet policies, and also track our research trends. Now, we have to take a deep breath, right? We already talked about dumpster fires and the housing crisis. We're going to take a deep breath before we go into our rental database and our rental research, because it's still a little bit of a dumpster fire, but it is getting better, I'll be honest. And I think that's, with credit to Michelson Found Animals, to Heart LA, to My Dog Is My Home, and other organizations that are really providing resources and research around dog inclusive housing and how we keep people and pets together. So it's not just us. I'm not going to take full credit for all of the amazing changes that are happening, but it is truly taking all of us working together to make sure that these changes are happening. So as of today on our housing database, 8.4% of the pet-friendly rentals that we have contacted and researched are dog inclusive. When I gave a similar presentation last year, I want to say we were down to about 7-ish%. So year after year, we're seeing this percentage increase. However, 8.4% of, I believe it's over 10,000 listings right now on our rental research dashboard, still just isn't enough, right? We know that folks are struggling to find housing. When in our research, we are seeing that there are more breed restrictions compared to weight restrictions, but many still have both. And then in our dog inclusive listings, 90% of them have no weight or size restrictions. And so going back to a previous slide where we did say we accept folks that are doing those dog interviews, but also Canine Good Citizen Awards, or maybe just a higher weight limit. What we're also finding, based on pet fee, rent, deposit, it's super dependent on size, age, and number of pets. We're typically seeing pet rent, so that monthly payment is about $25 to $50 per pet. We're seeing a pet fee somewhere between $200 and $500. A non-refundable pet deposit, again, $250 to $500, and then a maximum of 2 to 3 pets allowed. We're also seeing, there are more restrictions on different types of pets that you can have. So if you're someone who has reptiles or birds, we're seeing, restrictions on that as well. And it also depends on, of course, your city restrictions, and the municipal codes that you have. One thing that we always want to advocate for is for refundable pet deposits. We know that pets cause theoretically about $200 in damage throughout a stay at an apartment. And so those refundable pet deposits, or the non-refundable pet deposits, should be refundable if there's not damage over that amount. So we want a little bit of good news, which we do have some. Don't get me wrong, we have some. So there are apartments and companies that are changing their pet policies, which is fantastic. This is just one example. They definitely credit Pie High, the Pet Inclusive Housing Initiative, and Michelson and Habry, so the Human Animal Bond Research Institute, for their advocacy around pet inclusiveness. And we are seeing more and more properties recognizing that dogs and cats are part of the family, especially as we look towards more of our millennial and Gen Xers that are renting versus purchasing homes. There is a need for dog inclusive rentals, and I feel like there is pressure now on the property managers to start considering changes to their properties. We have some call to action. So participating in rental research. So completing a housing project either with us or on your own and sharing that information. Becoming a community partner. So sharing our handouts in the community, making sure that folks understand that there are resources out there for them. And there will be another resource sheet that is available after this presentation with QR codes to just about everyone who's a panelist on this call, and other resources as well that you can utilize for your teams. Introducing legislation. We have drafts of research and legislation that you can utilize locally or just be a sounding board for legislation. But the tricky part is we really need organizations to be tracking their data. So what are your pet support calls about? What are the reasons for surrender? So when you just have a blanket, well, housing is the reason for surrender. Can you dive a little bit more into that? So what is the housing reason? Is it affordability? Was it number of pets? Was it breed or size? Was it facing eviction? So really trying to hone in on those reasons so that we can provide better support to those families or create programs locally to make sure that those pet parents are supported. And then again, utilizing those handouts and resources from the resource guides. So it does take time, but it's possible. We celebrated 2 legislative sessions ago passing a homeowners insurance bill to remove breed and weight restrictions. I'll be honest that it took me 7 years to get that bill passed. So it's not something that's going to happen overnight in your communities. It's going to take tireless efforts. And of course, a bunch of resources you can see up at the top there. This is us or myself at the Minnesota Housing Agencies Conference. So we've got resources from Michelson, we've got resources from Best Friends, we have resources from, of course, us, we have resources from Animal Farm Foundation. I mean, there's a plethora of resources out there to be sharing. And it's always interesting to see which resource really catches the eye of a property manager or a leasing agent. And so having a couple different options for them is always key. We always have our little iPad app with our housing database or a computer monitor, so folks can then see if their apartment's listed, what apartments near them. It's kind of like a little competition for property owners and leasing agents to be like, oh, well, there are properties around us doing it, so maybe we should as well. And then we have like NCOIL, and being able to talk about insurance across the country and states that are removing barriers for homeowners insurance. And then, of course, lovely pictures of testifying. So if you've never testified before in front of the Senate or the House, in front of the chambers in your state, or even locally, city level, county level, absolutely, you can do that. It's not as nerve-wracking as you think if you're fully prepared with research and data. And of course, having your chief authors next to you to help answer any questions. And so really trying to find advocates locally who want to help advance pet inclusive policies is really, really key. Which, because of the chief authors that were next to me, I have to say it, and I hate to say it because I know that this can be polarizing for a lot of folks within animal welfare. We see it all the time on our Facebook posts, and I see it with other organizations too, where we say something about voting or something political, quote unquote political, and it's always, we'll keep the politics out of pets, right? We can't. We simply cannot keep politics out of pets, and we can't keep pets out of politics. In order to enact the changes that we want to make, we need to get political. We need to vote for people that are going to not only protect pets, but also protect human welfare as well. Deetsy here. If you don't follow Margot on Instagram, you absolutely should. They are doing some really amazing advocacy around people and pets. And I know some of us on the call probably have this sweatshirt. I know I just got mine in the mail the other day. But really, there is no animal welfare without supporting humans as well. And so it's just something that we need to remember and remind ourselves as we're doing this work and working to create partnerships. We do also have a national legislative tracker. The submission link, so if you are working on legislation locally and you want to share it with us so we can continue tracking bills across the country, that link will be coming soon. Our data specialist is working on that right now. But what's also nice about this legislative tracker is that if you have an idea for legislation locally, you can see descriptions of bills that have been submitted in the past, and also bills that are active during this session. So a few of us, we have a coalition that meets every month or so, and we started tracking bills last session to just test it out and see. But you can also start seeing where hot pockets are across the country of where legislation is being introduced. Minnesota, we had quite a few bills last session, and then same with the upper Northeast. But we would love to see more hotspots all over the country, making sure that legislation around people and pets are being introduced in coming sessions. We also have 300 plus community partner organizations where we provide information not only about us, but other resources, whether it's about housing or, wanting to start a pet resource center or a pet food shelf. We provide all of those resources for free to our community partners. We also utilize this database as a place for if someone is contacting us from Austin, Texas, and they say, hey, I really need this resource, or I need to surrender, or is there a local organization I can talk to? We're able to pull up our community partner list and send them the information for our partners that are local, which has been really helpful, especially if folks are searching for, we're getting a lot of requests for crisis fostering or crisis boarding, or finding a homeless shelter that does accept pets. And since we don't have that information, we're hoping that our partners locally would, or at least have an idea of who they should contact. Now, if you want to learn more or get involved, you can always volunteer with us. We're always looking for extra help. And then that way you get to learn more about the ins and outs of our research and how you can utilize that locally. So if you're interested, please reach out. We would love to have you and to partner with you and your organization. And at the end of the day, it is truly going to keep all of us working together to keep people and pets together. So again, pets are political. There are resources out there. We just have to share them and get them out, get eyes on them. And at the end of the day, we can support both ends of the leash and, really, really keep families intact. And all of these photos are folks that utilize our services here in Minneapolis. Um, on the far side with the peanut butter stick. This kiddo has been coming to us for our community pet clinics for years with his grandma. So it's something that we take a lot of pride in, is that we get to watch like the children grow up in our community too with pets. So really making sure that everything we do is a full family affair. And by making sure that kids are involved, we're able to keep people and pets together for futures to come. And I know we ended a little bit early with the presentation, but I want to save enough time for questions. And so at this time, I'm happy to switch it over and go to Q&A.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Shannon. Yeah, we got some good ones. Let's see. First one that came in from Kelly. Who is responsible for proving the breed of a dog, the landlord or the tenant? Our shelter has stopped using suspected dog breeds as we do not DNA test our dogs.
Yeah. I mean, they're depending on who you talk to, right? So, like Animal Farm Foundation, they have a huge campaign to remove breed restrictions in shelter, or sorry, breed restrictions, breed identifiers in shelters, and so not breed identifying dogs. Um, so that is definitely one mindset. What we often see with that is we're still then running into a pet interview or a dog being on the property and someone on the property saying, oh, well, that's a pit bull. And then that tenant is then faced with consequences or eviction or, you know, having to justify what type of dog that they have. So in short, there is not an answer to that question, right? Everyone thinks that they're an expert in visual dog identification. And one thing that has stuck with me through my tenure here is I want to say it was around BSL, breed specific legislation in Denver, where like 20% of visual breed identification is correct. And so one, it doesn't always work, right? Mixed breed dogs, there's like, how do you tell which part of a dog is a pit bull or which part is a husky or which part is a chihuahua? Like once it is a mixed breed dog, it is a mixed breed dog. It's not a prominent breed. Um, or um, there was a description at some point of a pit bull if it had a blocky head, a wide body, and a tail. So basically, if it looks like a potted plant, it's a potted plant, which again just doesn't work. And so that's where you could push back on those breed labels, or just making sure that we're saying like all dogs are individuals and base it on behavior and not breed.
I'm seeing here a question that's pretty decent, and I'm like really curious. How much of the housing restrictions are driven by insurance restrictions versus a landlord's own policies?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. We are seeing, so yes, there was a list of dog breeds created in the 80s, I believe, which insurance companies based their policies on. And we have slowly, again, everything is slow moving, slowly started to see more and more pushback on that of, well, it's not based in science, it's based on scare tactics, it's based on like a million different things. And so there are studies, I believe the CDC did one on dog bites, and there's multiple insurance research studies as well, where again, breed doesn't equal behavior. And so we're able to again push back on that and see those changes. But yes, there was a list created. We are seeing insurance companies slowly start changing their policies, right? So here in Minnesota and a couple other states, we have enacted legislation to remove those breed restrictions. and so it is possible. And our bill, we haven't received a ton of pushback from insurance companies locally about it. Of course, there are insurance companies across the country that do not breed discriminate. But again, you'd want to check locally because it can depend based on the agent and what they want in their portfolio, but also some states, Florida and California, and I believe there's one more in the Northeast that have different restrictions due to weather. So some insurance companies do not insure in those states.
Can local shelter reps volunteer to help update your database info for their area?
100%. We would absolutely love that. So we do have like a volunteer with us little link on our website. So if you want to join our rental research team, you can. If you want to email me, I'll connect you with our housing team and we can start inputting that data, or at least getting you the spreadsheet that we utilize so you can transfer that information over.
Just a follow-up question for my own sake.
Yeah.
Is it possible that that can be done remotely? Does it have to be local? And can it be done, say, in New York, where I'm from?
Absolutely. Yeah. We have volunteers all over the country. I would say the majority of our rental research team is not local to Minnesota. So we have folks across all of the different time zones. At one point, we had folks internationally as well. But yeah.
Thank you.
Shannon, do you know of educational resources to train staff and residents on dog safety, reading dog body language, how to approach dogs, the importance of pet waste management, etc.? If points of contact are more up to speed on dogs, we may have more approachable conversations.
Absolutely. And there are a ton of resources around dog body language. Fear-free sheltering has a lot of resources as well. So if your team hasn't gone through that, you could check that out. There's also some really cute infographics. I usually have them in my office. That's a fear-free one. But there's a lot of amazing resources out there if you just do a quick Google search. One thing that did come up when we were having conversations with property owners, is that they want to be connected to their local animal welfare organizations for those exact reasons. So they can be the experts in property and making sure that their tenants and their properties are taken care of. But they really want someone locally to help with the pet questions, right? So if there is a nuisance pet, if there's training that someone needs, they can direct that to the local humane society or the local shelter or rescue that the apartment can partner with.
What was the community resource database that you mentioned towards the end?
Yeah, so we have our Community Pals database. So those are organizations and businesses. So it's not just animal welfare organizations. We do have some human service agencies and city governments that are joining us to start really honing in on like dog inclusive housing is a thing and it's an issue and we need to work on it all together, which has been really great. But the link is right on our website and organizations can sign up right there.
This is a good follow-up. What is the difference between dog inclusive and pet friendly?
From our perspective, dog inclusive is no breed or weight restrictions. Pet inclusive would just be, wait, we said pet friendly, right? Pet friendly versus dog inclusive. Pet friendly would be super high level, dogs and cats are welcome. But with a caveat of a bunch of different restrictions, pet fees, deposits, really putting barriers in place to actually have those pets. Unless maybe you have a super cute, fluffy 20-pound dog and a cat that is spayed or neutered. And in some states declawed, right? So there are other just restrictions as well that can fall under that pet friendly.
What have you heard, if you've heard, from landlords or property owners on how restrictions can change?
Yeah. What we have heard is that folks, again, want those local partnerships. So I think that shelters, rescues, humane societies, I think that y'all really have a lot of leverage that you might not know, right? So building those partnerships with apartments that are local that maybe are pet friendly, quote unquote pet friendly, um, to really showcase the amazing animals that you have in your care, and also talk about the resources that you can offer, um, would really be probably like step one to really start having those changes.
Hey, I see one from Amanda. Insurance, even on the organization sides, are starting to become unmanageable, and a lot of the companies are dropping animal policies. What would be some alternatives or resources for this? How do we hold insurance companies responsible and bring light to the issue outside of legislation?
Now, I'll be honest, I'm not super familiar with insurance policies for shelters and rescues, but I feel like in all of the Facebook groups and in all of the conversations, it is a constant issue. Um, so I'm not super privy to that information. If there's someone in the chat, feel free. Yeah, Leedy is saying complain to your state insurance commissioner. So every state has an insurance commissioner, so you could definitely contact them. But as far past that, I'm not super sure.
Here's a really good one from Victoria Murphy. How do you suggest we get the DV shelters to remove restrictions that currently only allow service animals versus companion animals? Do you have comparative data to provide to them to answer those concerns?
Yeah, so I would probably direct some of those sheltering questions back to Christine's presentation. So the presentation before me from My Dog is My Home. But I would also, of course, recommend Purple Leash Project and Red Rover. So they have tons of resources and funding to help support shelters and DV shelters in becoming pet friendly, if not pet inclusive. Um, so those would be the resources I would say. One thing that we did not talk about is that I previously was the state's only shelter manager of a homeless shelter that was pet inclusive. So I know for a fact that it is possible to have a homeless shelter that is pet friendly, pet inclusive. And I say pet inclusive because we didn't have breeder weight restrictions. It was all based on behavior. We even had birds. And so like we were able to make that happen. We were super scrappy, but the shelter also had me as the director and the director of my pit bull's family. So having those resources of, hey, we need a kennel, great, I got it. We got it at our pet resource center. You need food, cool. And so again, it goes back to really creating those partnerships to create that lasting change.
Well, Shannon, we're out of time, but any questions that we didn't get to will be answered on Maddie's Pet Forum. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us. I love being here and learning so much.
Gosh, thank you so much. And again, thanks to Maddie's and Michelson for making Camp Maddie possible.